What if I told you that a single misspoken word, a fleeting moment on live television, could upend the carefully crafted image of a rising political star? Picture this. It's a crisp evening. The studio lights glare brighter than the cameras on a Vegas stage, and Melania Trump, yes, the former First Lady herself, takes the floor for what was billed as a routine segment on political commentary. She's framed by a backdrop of red, white, and blue, the anchor's voice trailing off as Melania leans into the camera, her lips curling into a practiced smile. But then something unexpected happens. A slip of the tongue, a hesitation that ripples through the broadcast like a pebble tossed into a still pond, shattering the illusion of control. In that instant, the world learned a secret about Jasmine Crockett, one that had been hidden behind polished speeches and carefully scripted appearances. That single moment became a seismic event, a revelation more explosive than anyone could have predicted. And by the time the credits rolled, political pundits were scrambling, social media was ablaze, and Jasmine Crockett's reputation was teetering on the edge of ruin. You will not believe what Melania said, or what she almost said, until it's too late. It started innocuously enough. Merchandise had been selling out at the network's online store, and executives were congratulating themselves on the buzz. They'd invited Melania to offer her take on the upcoming midterms, to opine on the shifting sands of American politics. Viewers anticipated her trademark poise, her glacial composure. After all, she'd spent years under the most unforgiving spotlight imaginable. But no amount of photogenic grooming can inoculate anyone against the human heart's propensity for error. The moment the red on air light flicked on, everything changed. Melania brushed a stray lock of hair behind her ear, took a measured breath, and launched into a sentence destined to echo across every cable news channel, every late-night show, every corner of the internet. Jasmine Crockett has always hidden her, she began, the words stuttering out as if her mind betrayed her mid-thought. The camera wavered for the barest second as Melania's eyes darted toward the floor. Behind her, the producers exchanged panicked glances. The teleprompter's scrolling text betrayed nothing, which meant those words shouldn't have come out. Yet they did. And in that breathless pause, millions held their breath, waiting for the revelation to drop like an anvil. Melania's lips pressed into a tight line. Then she hesitated, her gaze flicking sideways as she attempted to find the cue card that would rescue her. But the damage was done. The broadcast continued, but that half-finished phrase flashed on the monitors of media junkies who replayed it in slow-mo, searching for clues. What had she meant to say? What had Crockett been hiding? For all her elegance, Melania had unwittingly exposed a fault line that would widen with every passing second. In the hours that followed, the internet became a fever dream. Hashtags exploded. Hashtag Crockett exposed. Hashtag Melania slip. Hashtag what did she mean? Conspiracy theories sprouted like weeds, some claiming that Melania had been coerced by shadowy backroom operatives, others insisting that the former First Lady was signaling a much larger political gambit. Twitter polls asked whether Crockett's downfall was underway. Facebook groups debated if this slip was a mistake or a calculated move to elevate Melania's own star as a political commentator. Even late-night hosts couldn't resist taking jabs. One joked that Melania's slip was the political equivalent of walking through a minefield in glittering heels, sure to set off fireworks. But beneath the humor, a darker narrative was unfolding. Because what Melania nearly revealed might not have been smoke and mirrors, but a flicker of truth too incandescent to contain. Long before that televised stumble, Jasmine Crockett had been on an upward trajectory, so steep it defied gravity. A once obscure civil rights attorney from Dallas, she had catapulted into the national conversation with speeches that cracked open hearts and stirred the soul. Folk hero? Some said so. Trailblazer? Absolutely. Crockett's background was the stuff of legends. Born into a family that scraped by, raised by parents who sacrificed everything so their daughter could pursue the American dream. She studied law on a shoestring budget, worked nights in diners to pay tuition, and defended clients who had no one else to turn to. Each victory, each acquittal, each impassioned plea in the courtroom added another layer to her mythos. By the time she ran for Congress, supporters flocked to her side in droves. Her campaign rallies looked like revival meetings, and her fundraising numbers dwarfed those of seasoned politicians twice her age. Few doubted she was destined for greatness. But beneath the righteous fervor lay a complexity that only a handful glimpsed. Crockett was magnetic, yes, But she was also fiercely private, guarding her true self like a fortress behind those electrifying speeches. Loyalists adored the enigma. Detractors accused her of being opaque, of hiding skeletons in a closet so deep even X-ray vision couldn't penetrate. Rumors circulated, whispers of a scandal in college, murmurings about off-the-record alliances, and cryptic hints of family secrets. Most dismissed these as partisan fodder conjured by opponents desperate to tarnish her halo. Yet some kept their eyes peeled, convinced that beneath Crockett's silk-smooth exterior, something darker simmered. To them, Melania's slip was validation. The moment she hinted that Crockett had always hidden her, the embers of suspicion ignited into a blaze of speculation. Bear in mind, Jasmine Crockett's political rise was no accident. She had honed her skills in backrooms, forging alliances with labor leaders, community organizers, and grassroots activists. She'd built a coalition as diverse as Texas itself: blacks, Hispanics, women, LGBTQ advocates, all rallying behind her banner of justice and equality. In debates, she was laser-focused, slicing through opponents' platitudes with legal precision. She stood up to corporate behemoths, demanded accountability for police misconduct, and vowed to dismantle systemic racism piece by piece. To watch Crockett in action was to witness a symphony of intellect and passion, the crescendo swelling until the audience roared its approval. She was poised to become the first in a line of leaders who would transform Washington's status quo. Her detractors were few, her supporters legion. Until that fateful evening. Let us rewind to the weeks before Melania's on-air error. Jasmine had been busy. Fresh off a victorious runoff, she took the oath of office and strode onto Capitol Hill like a warrior queen. Her colleagues greeted her with respect tinged with wariness. After all, she was young, imposing, and bristling with idealism. She refused to play the usual games of bipartisanship. Instead, she charted her own course, forging caucuses, introducing tough legislation, and speaking at town halls with raw honesty. She didn't mince words. When asked about dangling healthcare coverage over the heads of low-income families, she quoted statistics with surgical accuracy. When told that climate change concerns were just fringe talk, she rattled off data on coastal erosion in her home district. She wasn't just a mouthpiece. She was an analytical force, an embodiment of the working-class grit she defended. Constituents adored her for it. But in Washington, not everyone appreciated such unwavering integrity. Political machines, reliant on backroom deals and corporate lobbyists, viewed her as a wildfire threatening to scorch the status quo. So when word spread of a chest-thumping exclusive featuring Melania, many in the Capitol tuned in, not out of admiration for the former First Lady, but because they sensed a storm brewing. What would Melania say? Would she critique the administration she once belonged to? Would she lend her glamour to the progressive cause? Or would she align herself subtly with conservative interests masquerading as moderate? The speculation was palpable, and Melania, poised like a swan gliding across a murky pond, was determined to maintain an air of inscrutability. The producers handed her talking points. Her team coached her on the optimal tone. Media strategists plotted out the perfect soundbites, the zingers that would go viral. They had rehearsed every line, checked every camera angle, and yet, in the live broadcast's crushing immediacy, the only thing they couldn't orchestrate was the human mind itself. When Melania uttered those fateful words, Jasmine Crockett has always hidden her. She froze time in a way that only live TV mishaps can. The network scrambled to cut to a commercial break, but split-second reality shows no mercy. Viewers saw her mind alight with recognition of her slip, her brow furrow, the momentary panic in her eyes. Then she corrected herself in a breathless hush. I mean, her innovative policies. But it was too late. Somewhere in the tangle of neurons that fire when adrenaline surges, Melania's brain had betrayed her polished veneer. That partial phrase lingered in the collective consciousness of an audience primed to pounce. Minutes later, YouTube clips of her blunder went viral. The segment was dissected by talk show hosts, legal commentators, and Instagram influencers. The clip played on loop, a taut line of mystery drawn between Melania's words and the secret they hinted at. And that secret belonged to Jasmine Crockett. Now consider the weight of those few words on Crockett's shoulders. Imagine waking up to 1,000 notifications, messages from supporters worried that a scandal was about to erupt, calls from local news stations asking for comment, text messages from family members alarmed by the online chatter. That morning, She sat at her kitchen table, a single steaming cup of coffee in her hands, staring at her phone as if willing it to reveal the truth. What had Melania stumbled upon? Crockett was no stranger to adversity. She had weathered threats during her campaigns, faced down accusations of being too radical, too untested, too unpredictable. But this was different. This was a slip of the tongue from a former First Lady, one who had maintained near invulnerability to scandal herself. If Melania had unearthed a vulnerability, then it must be something significant. Suspicion swirled. Some theorists claimed it was a policy misstep, a bill that Crockett had co-sponsored with a shadowy organization. Others whispered of personal indiscretions dating back to her college days in Nashville. A few trolls insisted that Melania knew about a secret offshore account, that Crockett was receiving illicit funds from an obscure consulting firm. The tangle of rumors grew more elaborate with each retelling. And as the sun climbed higher that day, Crockett's office braced for impact. A stern-faced staffer convened an all-hands meeting, urging everyone to maintain composure. Crockett addressed her team, her voice steady, her posture defiant, her eyes betraying nothing of the storm inside. She refused to lend credence to baseless speculation. "Stay focused," she told them. "We have work to do." But inside, she was a tinderbox of anxiety. What any of them might be about to do was next to impossible to predict. Handling a crisis born from a rival's slip of the tongue required dexterity, courage, and an ironclad belief in one's own truth. That day, Crockett held a press conference. Gathered in front of a brick facade on Capitol Hill, cobblestone beneath their feet, a motley crowd of reporters raised microphones. The camera lights glowed like miniature suns aimed at her face. She stepped up to the podium, her jaw set, eyes steaming with indignation. She began, "Earlier today, my name was invoked in an offhand remark. I'm here to set the record straight. I have nothing to hide. My record is transparent, my motives pure. I'm proud of my work and my integrity." There was applause, a scattering of amens from sympathetic onlookers. But also, a hush fell, a suspended breath as reporters poised follow-up questions. One stern-faced man asked, "Congresswoman, can you guarantee that no skeletons will emerge?" Another asked, "Is there a connection between you and any foreign interests?" Crockett replied with cold precision, "My track record is public. My campaign finances have been repeatedly audited. I have never taken a dime from illicit sources. If anyone wants proof, it's all out there for examination." Behind closed doors, though, she signaled her staff to launch an internal audit, painstaking, transparent, down to the penny. She ordered her aides to gather every scrap of documentation that could preemptively defuse rumors: bank statements, consulting contracts, travel logs. If someone indeed held evidence of wrongdoing, she would expose it herself before anyone else could weaponize it. It was a bold move, staking her credibility on impeccable transparency, but she had no choice. The alternative was to let the rumor mill churn unchecked, allowing unfounded allegations to stick. The public's memory, after all, seldom distinguished between unverified rumor and proven fact. In politics, innuendo can be as lethal as a smoking gun. Meanwhile, Melania Trump retreated to her own quarters of crisis. She had been reading off notes, one slip, one tiny misalignment of mind and teleprompter, and suddenly she was in the crosshairs of public scrutiny. Her team scrambled to craft a public apology, a carefully worded statement expressing regret for any confusion, insisting she had not meant to imply wrongdoing. "My words were regrettable," it said, "and I apologize for any distress I may have caused Congresswoman Crockett and her supporters." But the damage lingered. In the echo chamber of social media, apologies can be taken as admissions of guilt. Her defenders argued it was a simple mistake. Detractors insisted it was a coded message to conservative backers. Melania's reputation, long considered nearly impermeable, now showed cracks. While Melania dealt with the fallout of her on-air blunder, Crockett doubled down on her ground game. She held town halls, answering constituents' questions directly, presenting her campaign finances in live-streamed segments, and inviting local journalists to pore over her records. She even took the extraordinary step of offering to testify before a congressional committee if any legitimate inquiry arose. It was an audacious gambit. She was essentially daring anyone to produce evidence of wrongdoing, confident there was none to be had. That confidence emerged not from arrogance, but from the ironclad conviction she had built over years of navigating the legal system. She knew what it meant to be examined under a microscope, what it meant to have one's life laid bare. By turning the spotlight on herself, she believed she could quell the storm before it grew into a tornado. Yet drama thrives on tension, and tension thrives on uncertainty. As the days turned into a week, the story took darker twists. Anonymous sources began tipping off reporters. I hear she visited a certain PAC in Brussels. I hear she held undisclosed meetings in Dubai. I heard she contributed to a shell corporation. Each whisper forced Crockett to respond, to prove or disprove. Hours were spent on the phone with lawyers, auditors, even forensics experts tracing digital footprints back 5 years. Her staff felt like they were running on adrenaline. Local news stations filed Freedom of Information Act requests. National outlets dispatched investigative teams. Private investigators knocked on doors in Dallas, while D.C. insiders combed through lobbyist registries. Soon, it felt as though no stone was unturned, yet no smoking gun was found. Even with no concrete evidence surfacing, the public's fascination only grew. In a world where suspicion often trumps reality, the whispers became part of the lore. The story wasn't just about Crockett anymore. It was about what her ordeal said about modern politics. How a single slip of the tongue by a prominent figure could cascade into a full-blown crisis. How quickly rational discourse could be supplanted by sensationalism. How the public, starved for scandal, would fill the void with conjecture. Scholars of political science started commenting on the incident, calling it a case study in the power of speech. Psychologists weighed in on how the human mind processes partial information, often leaping to conclusions. Communications experts dissected Melania's public relations strategy, criticizing the lack of immediate clarity. Every angle was examined, every consequence probed. And through it all, Jasmine Crockett remained at center stage, forced to prove the obvious. She had nothing to hide. Then came a moment of reckoning. An independent watchdog, funded by a coalition of activists, announced it had completed a thorough review of Crockett's finances, her travel logs, her recorded communications. They released a public report. No evidence of unethical behavior, no signs of illicit payments, no hidden agendas. The findings were encyclopedic, citing every transaction, every meeting, every speech. They concluded that Mercury was mercurial, but Crockett was unblemished. The report dropped like a bombshell on the rumor mill. Social media reactions ranged from stunned silence to begrudging admiration. Conservative commentators who had insisted on a grand conspiracy suddenly pivoted, either denouncing the original rumor or quietly moving on to the next hot topic. The narrative reversed. Now Crockett went from being an accused mystery to a vindicated champion. She had survived the crucible of suspicion and emerged unscathed. But the ordeal left scars, deep ones. It exposed the fragility of reputation and how easily a person's life can be upended by a few words uttered in error. As the dust settled, analysts began unpacking the larger implications. Could this be a blueprint for future political takedowns? A strategy where a slip of the tongue, real or staged, becomes a weapon? Some experts argued that Melania's flub was too convenient, that it reeked of political theater. They pointed out patterns, the timing, the platform, the aftermath. Was it orchestrated to distract from bigger news? Some believed the real target was not Crockett, but the entire progressive movement. By sowing doubt about one of its rising stars, the chatter on the right attacked the broader ecosystem. It was reminiscent of divide-and-conquer tactics, sowing discord among allies by focusing on one outspoken individual. Others dismissed these theories as conspiracies unto themselves. They insisted that human error was just that, a momentary mistake, blown out of proportion by a vicious media cycle. Amid these debates, Jasmine Crockett did something unexpected. She reached across the aisle to Melania Trump. In a gesture that stunned Washington, Crockett extended an olive branch, a public invitation to sit down, one-on-one, in a televised conversation. She wanted to clear the air, to address Melania's concerns directly, and, if possible, forge an unlikely alliance. "We are all human," she said. "We all make mistakes." Critics pounced, some accusing Crockett of naivete, others praising her maturity. But she remained undeterred. She believed that healing the fracture required honesty, empathy, and the willingness to see beyond partisan labels. When the two women finally came face to face in a studio drenched in spotlights and high-powered cameras, anticipation crackled in the air. Would they argue? Would tempers flare? Or would they surprise the world with a display of unity? The preview clips showed two poised figures sitting across from each other, their expressions a mixture of wariness and resolve. The conversation unfolded slowly, like the assembly of a fragile puzzle. Melania admitted her mistake, acknowledged that her words sprung from an offhand remark, not a calculated smear. She explained that she had been fed faulty intel by a junior aide, details that, when typed hastily in her folder, led her to utter that partial phrase. She confessed that she had not intended to malign Crockett, but was instead trying to raise questions about foreign influence in American politics, a topic she felt strongly about. She believed Crockett's alliances merited scrutiny, though she never had direct evidence. It was a reveal as much for Melania as it was for Crockett, the human behind the polished persona, fumbling through conflicting briefings, grappling with a media environment that allowed no margin for error. Her admission was unvarnished, a rarity in an arena where deflection is the norm. Crockett, in turn, shared her perspective, the impact of that moment on her mental health, the sleepless nights spent defending her integrity, the haunting doubt that perhaps she was hiding something she hadn't yet discovered. She spoke candidly about the pain of being mistrusted, how rumors gnawed at her confidence, and how, for a fleeting moment, she questioned whether she truly knew herself as well as she believed. Their exchange became a tapestry of vulnerability. Two formidable women, each accustomed to wielding power, stripping away defenses to reveal shared humanity. Viewers who tuned in expecting fireworks instead found themselves watching a quiet reconciliation. It was almost haunting. Two women bridging a chasm carved by politics, setting aside ambition to address a moment of collective folly. Social media erupted anew, but this time with a different soundtrack. Supporters of both camps praised the dialogue. Pundits heralded it as a masterclass in conflict resolution. Some skeptics accused the entire meeting of being a PR stunt, an elaborate production designed to rescue Crockett's image as much as Melania's. But even the harshest critics couldn't deny the authenticity they sensed in those moments. Melania's voice cracking when she described the panic that gripped her when she realized what she'd said. Crockett's guarded tears as she recounted the personal toll the rumor took on her family. It was raw, real, and refreshingly unguarded, a rarity in a landscape where every statement is vetted by focus groups and spin doctors. In the aftermath, the political landscape shifted subtly but palpably. Crockett's approval ratings soared, her stature among progressive circles solidified, and her detractors found themselves scrambling to find new lines of attack. Melania, too, emerged from the crisis more nuanced, a commentator unafraid to confront her own missteps, earning grudging respect even from those who disagreed with her on policy. Their unlikely exchange became a case study in journalism programs, a textbook example of how to turn a controversy into an opportunity for growth. Scholars dissected the rhetoric, dissected body language, and marveled at the vulnerability on display. They drew lessons about empathy, transparency, and the enduring power of human connection in a divisive era. Yet beneath the surface, deeper questions lingered. Was this reconciliation sustainable, or merely a momentary lull before the next electoral battle reignited partisan hostilities? Could two women from opposite sides of the aisle maintain a bridge when the tidal forces of political polarization threatened to tear it down? Some warned that the truce might be temporary, that next year's campaign cycle would erode the goodwill they had generated. Others argued that this moment marked a subtle but meaningful shift, a recognition that authenticity and empathy might have a place even in high-stakes politics. Only time would tell which prophecy would hold. Amid these swirling debates, Crockett pressed forward with her agenda. She championed legislation that increased transparency in campaign financing, making it more difficult for anonymous donors to influence elections. Ironically, this very episode served as proof of concept. It demonstrated how easily misinformation could fester, how difficult it was to separate fact from rumor once the spark was ignited. She proposed a bipartisan commission to study the impact of live media errors on political discourse, advocating for safeguards that would mitigate the damage caused by unscripted mistakes. Critics accused her of overreaching, saying that government should not police speech, even flawed speech. But supporters pointed out that she only sought voluntary guidelines and best practices, not punitive measures. It was a nuanced stance, fitting for a lawmaker who had lived through the chaos of being falsely implicated by a careless comment. Melania, for her part, launched a public awareness campaign about the ethics of commentary in broadcast media. She collaborated with journalism schools to fund scholarships for budding reporters, insisting that the next generation be better prepared to handle live situations. She reached out to network executives, sharing her experience and urging them to build clearer protocols for on-air fact-checking. Some saw this as a strategic pivot, a way for her to carve out a post-White House niche as a media reform advocate. Others simply saw a woman grappling with the weight of her words, determined to turn embarrassment into education. No matter the motive, her message resonated. The world was increasingly intertwined, and a Flub broadcast across millions of screens had the same potential for harm as any calculated rumor mill. And so life went on. Crockett in her Capitol Hill office, drafting bills and attending hearings. Melania in interview studios, offering commentary and championing her causes. Their lives, once briefly intertwined by a slip of the tongue, diverged into parallel paths that both bore the imprint of that singular moment. Yet neither would ever forget the day when a single phrase changed everything. In quiet moments, Crockett would find herself replaying it in her head. Jasmine Crockett has always hidden her. She would wonder what might have happened if Melania had simply said, "Jasmine Crockett has always inspired me," or "Jasmine Crockett has always impressed me." The difference of two words might have meant applause instead of upheaval. And Melania, when she closed her eyes at night, might still sense that pang of regret, knowing that a thoughtless remark had risked the reputation of someone she barely knew. But perhaps that's the lesson. Language wields power far beyond its weight. A single misstep can cascade into a catastrophe or a revelation. It can wound or heal, divide or unite. For Jasmine Crockett, it was a trial by fire, a crucible that tested not only her integrity but her resilience. She emerged tempered, a living testament to the truth that transparency can conquer suspicion, that authenticity carries more weight than unearned innuendo. For Melania Trump, it was a humbling reminder that even the most polished facade can crack, revealing the vulnerable humanity beneath. It taught her that public figures bear a heavy responsibility, that words spoken in a split second can echo across years. In the final analysis, their intertwined story became more than just a tabloid headline. It morphed into a larger narrative about modern politics, the perilous interplay between media, rumor, and reputation in an age where every syllable is archived, clipped, remixed, and broadcast. It underscored how the public's hunger for scandal can eclipse the truth, even as it spotlighted the possibility for redemption when courage and transparency combine. And it offered a blueprint for how two adversaries, or potential adversaries, could transcend preconceptions, confront mistakes, and find common ground in the most unlikely of circumstances. So the next time you watch a politician speak, remember that behind every poised remark lies a tapestry of preparation and vulnerability. A single flub could expose secrets, real or imagined, and unleash a tempest in the hearts and minds of millions. But that flub could also be an opportunity, a chance to show humility, to bridge divides, to reaffirm the power of honesty. Because in the end, it's not just about winning headlines or skewering opponents. It's about the fragile beauty of human communication, flawed, unpredictable, and endlessly surprising. And if you've made it this far, gratitude for listening to this tale of a slip that shook the nation, a truth that shone brighter than rumor, and a reconciliation that proved impossible things are possible. If you want more such stories of intrigue, insight, and the raw drama behind the scenes, join us on this journey. Don't miss a single twist. Subscribe now.